Alright folks, chapter 3 on trust. Let's first talk about zero force members. Alright, so first thing first, we have to understand the different scenarios that a zero force member will exist. Right, the first scenario is basically, just make this bigger. Oh, okay. Is basically when, okay, so we first know that Fy and Fx must be equilibrium, aka equals to 0. Okay? And in this case, so now let's say I have a bar here, and then I'm going to change my color, and I have another bar here. Okay? So if you just look at resultant force alone, this bar, essentially, it can only exert force in the x direction. It doesn't matter whether it's compression or tension. It will always be in the x direction. The vertical bar will always be in the y direction. Why can't I draw straight? Okay, there we go. Y direction. Alright? So, if that's the case, if let's say I were to take Fy equal to 0, okay, let's name this bar A, and then let's name this bar B, okay? Bar A of the Y must be equals to something that's opposing it. But in this case, there is nothing opposing it. So it has to be 0. Take note that these are internal forces, okay? I don't know whether yellow will be a very good color. Nope. Okay. Internal forces. Take note that the moment you have external forces, or rather if you look at a free body diagram as a whole, right? Every single internal forces are just going to cancel each other out. Which is why for the entire free body diagram, you only implement external forces. But then when you were to zoom in and look at a particular joint, look at a particular section, look at a small specific area, that's where you have to include internal forces. Okay, I'm going to try to touch on that later, but for now we'll try to understand zero force member first. So this is one scenario where a zero force member. Coming back to this, then in this case my Bx is also 0 because there is nothing opposing it. However, now let's say, so in this case these two are just zero force members, okay? But then now let's say I have an external force, okay? This is external force of 100 Newton. Then in this case, this is not valid anymore. So if I were to redo, go to 0, I'm assuming that my B is going outwards, okay? Like it's having tension, and tension is positive. So I'm just gonna do B x minus, because external force is coming to the left side. Left side, I'm only looking at this area right here, okay? So right side is positive, left side is negative. So since my external force is going on the left, it will be a minus 100. Assuming equilibrium, that means Bx is equals to 100 Newton. So this is a scenario where there is an external force. And the moment there's an external force, something may not be zero force moment or members. In this case, my A is still 0 because there is nothing opposing this whole entire free body diagram in the y direction. Okay? So this is the first case when two joints or two members with no external loading and are not aligned to each other. they will both form zero force member. Okay, so some examples can be like this, okay, or some examples can be like this, some examples can be like this. But you notice a pattern? Do you all notice a pattern? That somehow I will always, I know it's not that straight, but I will always have a horizontal line, or rather a line that is only straight in one axis. So what do I mean by that? Means I can also have, okay, it's not that straight, but I can also have something like this, okay? Or maybe I should just, I don't know, draw something like this. So I'll always have a line in one axis. Okay, now imagine this straight, this is straight, this is straight, and then this is straight. Okay, I know it's not that clear, but you get it. So this is the first case when two members with no external loading and they are not aligned to each other. With one more condition, one of them have to be parallel to a certain axis, x or y. Okay? Now the next scenario is pretty much the same as the first scenario. The next scenario is when, same thing, I have a straight line, I have a random line over here. However, now I have a force coming here. Okay? Then I'm just gonna label this A and then B, right? So in this case, which one is my zero member or zero force member? Take note that this is the external loading, okay? Now let's try to draw it a little bit simpler, shall we? Because this is slanted, let's conform them to their respective x and y. So this is Fy, Fx. Then this is Ay, and this is Ax. The reason why I'm drawing the arrows in the opposite direction of each other is because Newton's third law, right? I mean, I can also draw them in the same direction, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. The direction of it does not matter, okay? At least in this scenario, or in this explanation. So, same thing. If I do Fy equal to 0 and Fx equals to 0, let's do y first. So we have a Fy. Okay, maybe I should. It's a bit. Maybe I should make this P, so it's not that confusing. Okay, so I have a Py plus minus Ay equals to 0. So what does that mean? That means that Py equals to Ay. Okay, now let's look at our x. We have a let's assume that, okay, I need to indicate. So this, in this case, going up is positive, going down is negative. In this case, going right is positive. So I'm just also going to assume that my B is going in this direction, okay? So I have a Bx, technically B is already x, but just to make it clear, I'm just going to put Bx plus Py minus Ax equals to 0. Okay? So now I have this B. So if I were to just look at my x alone, I can safely assume that B should have some form of values, or should have some form of magnitude to it. Am I right? But then here comes the part where I'm going to explain why this boy have no value. Because if you come back to your y, your resultant force of y, Py equals to Ay. Then, because my A and P are parallel to each other. They are collinear to each other. What does that mean? That means that the angle over here and the angle over here is exactly the same. So essentially, it doesn't matter I write cosine or whatever, okay? Cosine alpha equals to cosine or sine, it doesn't matter. It's just an angle. But because both the alphas are the same, I can cancel out each other. Am I right to say that? And because of that, I am left with P equals to A. Okay? That also means that for the x value, it should be the same. Because it doesn't matter I change sine, cosine, tangent, it doesn't matter. What matters is my alpha is always the same for both P and A, which is why P equals to A. And so because of that, if I were to just look at this statement alone, okay, maybe I shouldn't put Bx also. Okay, but then because these two are equivalent, equivalent, yeah, it's basically saying like 1 minus 1 or 2 minus 2, x minus x, okay, or n minus n. So this conforms to 0. So b plus 0 equals to 0. B is 0. And this is my explanation why B is a zero force member. So in this scenario, the member that is not collinear to the force, is pink a nice color? I think so. That is not collinear to the force and the bar will be your zero force member. Okay? Now comes to the last equation, which is pretty much this scenario as well. The last equation is, instead of 2 members and 1 external force, I now have 3 member, okay? So I now have A, imagine there's a joint here, I'm just going to draw a big ass circle, B and C. Now, I don't really need to explain this. I can just literally replace B with an external force, just like the previous example. And my entire same explanation is valid. So this scenario is basically the same as the previous one. Okay? Yeah, I think that's it. But however, if you do want me to explain, actually no, there's no point. It's the same. Yeah, it's the same explanation really. Or maybe another way to explain this is to show you some real question examples where this boy is completely straight, and so is this boy. Actually, this one doesn't matter. Straight or not, it doesn't matter. So we have a point A, we have a B, and then we have a C. Okay? So external force wise, okay, this is where a lot of people get confused. Like, okay, so I'm just going to draw this. Okay? People get confused over why I can remove, maybe I should draw a D here. I can remove CD. Okay? Why? Because even though I have an external force here, if we were to look at ADB, or preferably the joint, specifically the joint D, you notice that if I were to zoom in here, it gives me the scenario that I literally just explained just now. It gives me the the bar, technically the force, you know, but it just replaced with another bar, and then another member that is not collinear with it. So in this case, this little guy right here will become a zero force movement. Okay, but then now you may argue, but now I have an external load coming into here. Yes, technically, there should also be a load coming here. Now this is where it gets a little bit confusing, and I also don't really know how to verbalize my understanding. But because we have to understand that we are now looking at internal forces as well. So if we were to just look at D alone, like if I was just to magnify D, oh damn, okay, that's too much. Okay. Or what if I draw though? Will it be too thick? Oh, it's quite thick. Maybe I should just... Okay. In this case, let's just look at internal forces alone. Okay, we are now just looking at internal force. From A to D, okay, I'm just going to make life simple. I'm just going to draw A here, and I think here was a B. Yeah. So from A to D, I can only have a force in this direction. You know what? This is too thick. I can only have a force in the horizontal direction. And then for B, I can also only have a force in a horizontal direction. Take note, direction does not matter, left or right, it doesn't matter. Just know that it's only in the horizontal direction. Okay. Internally, can my AD and DB have a force in the Y direction? Internally, no. Externally, I think so. Okay, so because internally you cannot have a vertical force for AD and DB, this guy, this bar over here, have no choice but to be equals to 0 in terms of the Y direction force. Which is why, if you just look at this blue circle, the diagram inside, it makes sense. But then if you were to zoom out, it doesn't make that much of a sense because I have a force pushing it down. So ideally, or realistically, there should be loading spread all across here. But then if I were to come down to the bottom, my whole internal forces explains itself why this guy shouldn't have or should be a zero force member. Yeah, I have no idea, man, but